we will.
What is up, everybody, and afternoon edition of NBA Live Before Lock, because we've got games spread out throughout the day for MLK Day. So hopefully, if you guys are out for the day because of the holiday, enjoying your day off, watching Live Before Lock with us, building some NBA lineups. We had the NFL slate over the weekend, which last week's games, not all that great. This weekend, terrific football games,
Yeah.
more than made up for last weekend. So we're going to break down some basketball now. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Eric, how are you doing? How was your weekend?
Weekend was good. NFL. I mean, I held hands with like the entire field on like Jahmyr Gibbs, on a number of other things. I just needed something serviceable, something remotely close out of like any of the wide receivers that I played. But it would appear that was impossible. If you paid up for a wide receiver, you got shelled. So that was unfun. But otherwise, it was a great weekend of games. Good to be back here talking a little NBA. Let's do the damn thing.
Yeah, our big Saturday discussion was about you preferred Jahmyr Gibbs, I preferred Saquon Barkley. Really didn't matter. They both absolutely, I mean, obviously the answer was both.
Both.
But in terms of which one we preferred, didn't matter. Neither of them could have possibly been better. He had, Barkley finished like 41 fantasy points. You got 38 out of Jahmyr Gibbs, but Barkley was also a little bit more expensive. So yeah, that was what we spent a big portion of our Saturday show talking about, and really didn't matter which one you ended up preferring. You want to play all of them in all of your lineups, then not pay up for any wide receivers.
Play Washington defense against Gibbs and Amon-Ra, and just punt at the defense. And I mean, it was typical 4-game slate stuff.
Yeah. That is actually what you needed for the nuts. It was Laporta, Gibbs, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, like full game stack of Commanders lines, but also including the Commanders defense, which not a lineup I personally landed on, but one of our subs did. I don't know if you got the screenshot there, Jordan, but we had sub only played one lineup over the weekend and won $1 million with it. So that is like the 5th or 6th milli win that we've had for the NFL season this year.
Unreal.
And, no milli wins for NBA, but it's because there aren't regular NBA milli makers or anything like that. What have there been? One, maybe 2 NBA milli makers this year, Eric?
There's been one so far, and it was a $2,500 buy-in, so that was fun.
Yeah. NFL, on the other hand, there's been a handful this year, and a lot of them have come from our site. So if you guys do want to sign up for the tools, link down below in the YouTube description box. You can sign up for any of the packages we have on our site. They all come with access to our Discord channel, or take advantage of the link join offer. For each one of our affiliate partners, you guys sign up with 1 free month of NBA core access, or 1 free month of core access to any sport of your choosing. Just, this is an NBA show. NFL's almost over. So I figure a lot of you are probably more interested in NBA than NFL at this point in the season, but link down below in that YouTube description box. And yeah, let's start getting into the slate, Eric. And we've been blessed that FanDuel and DraftKings included the same games on the main slate, which is a headache we don't have to deal with, which we had to deal with for NBA. But here's what we have going on right now for the NBA injury report. We have Cat is questionable. We've got Steph Curry questionable. Although with that said, I feel pretty good that Steph Curry is going to play. He said that he was going to play, so we'll see if it ultimately ends up coming to fruition here. We've got Josh Hart questionable. Kobe White's questionable. Rudy Gobert is questionable. And going through the injury report and just trying to isolate the ones that are relevant to our slate here. We've also got Bradley Beal listed as questionable. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for the key injuries. Of all the players who are questionable, what do you have your eye on the most and why?
Rudy Gobert. I get the Knicks as well because they're a little bit later. And Josh Hart, Karl Anthony Towns, we just saw Cat sit the last 2, and it's a thumb. It's so weird that we don't know what's going to happen with a thumb. What do you do in warmups to figure out if you need to play with your thumb or not? But I think because Memphis just continually brings pace and ridiculousness to every single game. I mean, I was on the under there. It's now moved against me a little bit because Ja Morant is playing today. That was announced earlier already. But Rudy Gobert, if you get him out, man, we are talking about lots of minutes, lots of chalk for Naz Reid. They probably go to a little bit of Luka Garza as well, but then we get the same thing where we have Dante DiVincenzo out. You've got Conley, Edwards, McDaniels, Randall going up against Memphis and the pace that they're bringing to every single game. I think that it's going to be a huge one because, I mean, Naz Reid, it's just like set it and forget it stuff if he ends up starting.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to know what's going to happen there for afternoon games. I generally tend to think players who are questionable a little more likely to sit than play. It's less time to get treatment over the course of the day. The Cat one, I'm also really not sure what to make of for a lot of the same reasons you said. He's been a game time decision with what was it? I just saw you react to something. What happened?
Dante DiVincenzo just got an alert. Dante DiVincenzo suffered a grade 3 left toe sprain and is out indefinitely. Fuck my life. I hate sports. I hate
Oh,
basketball. I hate everyone.
that was a story from this morning.
I didn't see it at all until just now. I just had
Ah,
somebody send it to me, and it's just like, I hate everything. I didn't even notice that. I just knew he was out today, obviously, but God, I hate basketball.
yeah,
Don't be a
he's
fan of
got
teams. Be Greg. Be Greg.
great toe sprain. Great toe sprain for him is what the injury is listed as there. But yeah, so I thought that some unexpected player got ruled out on the NBA slate. Dante
No.
DiVincenzo. I mean, there is relevance to that because Mike Conley sticks in the starting lineup, and we can feel a little bit more confident in his minutes. So it is pertinent to today's slate. But the Cat one, I really don't know what to make of because he's been a game time decision a couple games in a row. He's got a bone chip in his thumb, so I guess what's happening is he's going out and he's taking shots before the game and just seeing how good his thumb feels. It is on his shooting hand, which I think probably matters a little bit more than if it was on his offhand. So Cat, he's also going to be a game time decision here. And then if you look at the where that game is situated on the slate, it's right in the middle. We've got the games spread out throughout the day where we've got the 2 p.m. game Eastern time, 2:30, 3, 3:35. So the games are going to be spaced out. It's like a poor man's version of the Christmas Day slate. The games aren't as good. And then in addition to that, it's, games spread out, but only 30 minutes. Not going to be like one of them on at a time. So I'm with you. I don't know exactly what to make of Karl-Anthony Towns. Are you with me, though? Do you think Steph Curry plays today?
The line would indicate no. The line is basically screaming that it's definitely going to be Steph Curry sitting. It's gotten bet up to 10, which you could say happens to Boston traditionally here. But I mean, anybody who's modeling this out, I just don't know how you land on 10 unless you take Steph Curry off the floor. It's just gotten to be more and more ridiculous as the days gone on here. Got up early this morning and, took a peruse through everything from last night. And I mean, there's 10 and a halves that exist at Caesars, at FanDuel. And whenever you see stuff like that, where it moves 4 points, 3 points overnight, you are definitely leaning towards Steph Curry being out. I will say, because that's the last game, there's a lot of interesting stands you can make when it comes to Golden State. I think with some of the pricing, obviously Steph Curry, you're replacing just about everything. And with Pajemski out as well, I mean, you're talking about ball handling from Spencer. You're talking about a really, really thin Golden State team if he ends up out. And just because all the other pieces are out, I do lean towards him being out because of the line moving. I lean towards him being out. We'll get into some of the ins and outs of that, but I think Dennis Schroeder probably one of the more interesting tournament targets on the slate.
Okay. All right. So if you do think that there's a good chance that there's clearly going to be a viable value angle to rostering other players. By the way, you are muted in playback.
Am I really? That's nice of me.
Yeah. So
I'm sure everybody's being nice. Here I am. There we go.
the thing that I always find hard with some of these situations is that Steph said that he expects to play today. Kerr said that the injury wasn't all that serious. So while he finds himself questionable in the injury report, I feel like I kind of have to expect him to play a little bit more than not. But at the same time, too, it is a very tricky situation because you get all this value that opens up for Golden State if he doesn't end up playing. But if you try to create your lineups assuming that he sits and then he ends up playing, there's nothing to really pivot to. It's a situation we ran into on Friday as well when SGA was questionable, and that was something that Josh and I covered a ton on the show. And then also, Spiz Wolf in the chat said that there was which reporter was it? I read that as well, where it was reported that Steph Curry is expected to play today. So all of the information we've gotten does indicate that he's going to more likely play than not. But yeah, if he doesn't, then it obviously creates a lot of value in a situation the field isn't going to be on. And that was what I did for the Friday slate with SGA. The difference is I was very confident SGA wasn't going to play on Friday, but
Same.
I don't feel the same way about Steph Curry today. So it's tough. It's tough. You're leaning more towards him sitting.
I mean, Steve Kerr's a damn dirty liar. So he's probably the worst coach, him and Jason Kidd. If you're trying to just tell me I have to put my life on him being in or out, I'm probably just going to die. Like whatever I do, I'm going to be wrong because whatever they say doesn't have any merit to it at all, and we can't take it at face value. I just look at the line movement. The line movement, again, I don't see how you get to 10.5 unless Steph sits. It's just, I know that they're very thin. I know that Steph is just one guy going up against for all intents and purposes, a very, very healthy Boston team at full strength, whereas Golden State, no Draymond Green, no Kuminga, no Kyle Anderson, no Bajemski. And still, it's in Golden State. It's kind of a wonky schedule day. And I just would think that if you're going to move it 3.5 points here overnight, it's got to be leaning towards Steph being out just because of what the betting line is doing. But there's obviously some merit to just playing a little bit of Steph and playing a little bit more of the Golden State guys, hoping that something breaks your way. At 9K, it's pretty easy to just pivot to, something else. You can get to Brown for 1,000 less and maybe maneuver around like two pieces of a lineup. But I'm playing 150 today. I feel pretty comfortable in saying that no matter what I do, I'm going to get to a little bit more Wiggins, a little bit more Trace Jackson Davis, a little bit more Schroeder, but nothing crazy, just because I think something is going to break in this Minnesota-Atlanta situation, like Minnesota or the Knicks, excuse me. Like one of those two situations probably have a bunch of value. And Golden State, even with a Steph Curry out, I mean, yeah, you'd really want to get to them, but there's a chance they just lose by 40. And it's like outside of Gui Santos, nothing looks great.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm more referencing Steph saying he was going to play than Kerr himself. And I just posted the quote in the chat, but Steph, while was icing his ankle and was talking to media, he was asked how his ankle felt, and he said, "It feels great. I'll see you guys on Monday." So that to me is an indication that I think he plays today. That's where I'm kind of pulling my information from.
Gotcha. Daniel Gafford has 30 PRA in the first half against Charlotte. Just want to throw that out there.
There we go. Gafford, did you play any DFS for the early slate too?
Or just sure did. Did some bets, did some DFS. I'm on Daniel Gafford double plus 200, but only for a small amount. It was like $25, but like played a quarter unit on that. Have a PRA for Gafford that hit in the first quarter. That was very useful. And then, Mark Williams, who had 4 fouls in 10.5 minutes of play. Way to go. Good job, champ. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, and if you guys want to go check out Eric's Tails package, you get access to some of those bets for yourself. You could have been riding with the Daniel Gafford PRA that he said already hit in the double-double there. So go check out Eric's Tails package over on Tails. Let's start getting into what we do know about this slate and some of the top overall value plays. If you wouldn't mind, Jordan, could you actually pull some of the ownership and put it up on screen here? If anybody has questions for us in Discord, I'll be looking out for that as per normal. Here's what we have for ownership for the slate, Eric. These are expected to be the chalk plays as of now. We have, and there was an ownership update from 1 minute ago. We've got 3 uber chalky players on the slate, 2 of them coming from your Minnesota Timberwolves. We've got Karis LeVert, the most popular player on the slate, pulling 50% ownership. He's expected to get some extra run with Evan Mobley being out. We've got Naz Reid pulling big ownership. We've got Jaden McDaniels pulling big ownership, both of them benefiting from the absence of Dante DiVincenzo. Then you've also got Jared Allen super popular. You got Darius Garland super popular. Cat right now really popular, although that's something that's pretty flimsy based on what ends up happening with him in the injury report. Then you've also got Julius Randle being questionable, being very popular with Dante DiVincenzo being out. Rudy Gobert, meant to say that he's popular despite him being questionable. Of all these players that I just listed who are over 30% owned, do you have a favorite chalk option? And is there anybody you'd want to be getting away from?
Yeah, Karis LeVert's 4,200. He's going to start more than likely again. If he doesn't, obviously that would change things and he wouldn't be as good. But he only played 25 minutes, didn't really do a whole hell of a lot against Minnesota. They ended up going to some different lineups towards the end of that game. And you can do that when you have Max Strus at 3,800 off the bench. And there's no doubt about it. But Karis LeVert is generally a really good fantasy producer. And now he gets to go up against Phoenix. So a little bit better matchup, I would say, than the Minnesota Timberwolves, where it's not just pace, but a better defensive team traditionally than what you're going to get on the Phoenix side of things with Devin Booker in. If you get Bradley Beal in as well, obviously that's a weaker defender than somebody like a Ryan Dunn, who's played really well on both ends of the floor here for the Suns of late, for what it's worth. I'm curious that Ryan Dunn, I thought we would wake up to like him being potentially massive chalk, but no, he is 5%. He was a potential nuke of the night candidate. But my major thing is like Karis LeVert at 4,200 can be a placeholder to hope that you get some news coming your way as well. So like no matter what way you slice it, like he's already a good play. If you need to get off of some of that chalk for whatever reason based on earlier information from the 3 games previous to it, you've got that, and you get that extra, half hour, extra hour that you're looking at from some of the other news from the earlier games. So Karis LeVert, I think he's my favorite of the chalk options. If you get Gobert out, I gotta think Julius Randle is going to look better. Obviously, Naz Reid would end up looking nuclear and be my favorite option of the entire day, and most people's as well. But as it stands right now, Karis LeVert.
Question also on Karl-Anthony Towns. If he does play, considering that the injury is to his shooting finger or shooting thumb, how concerned should we be about his efficiency? And maybe do they try to limit, not that you could intentionally limit a guy's usage, but maybe is it going to be Jalen Brunson has the ball in his hands a little bit more? Is that at all a concern for you when it comes to Karl-Anthony Towns if he is playing today?
If he can play, we have the efficiency is one thing, but as far as like minutes or can he do, like Tibbs, if you're available, he will run you into the ground. If he dies kind of thing. So like, I'm not worried about that side of it. The efficiency, it is the shooting hand. It's a thumb, but other than like when you're sitting there and it's sitting in the palm of your hand, you're basically rotating off of your index and your middle finger. So like, I don't think it's horrendous. If it's a pain tolerance thing, I mean, I bet he can get a shot, an injection, something to some extent. I don't know how I'd factor that in. All I know is he's 9,700 against an up-tempo Atlanta team that, I mean, this total is definitely going to move based on Karl-Anthony Towns news. But as it sits right now, if we just call it a middle for like a true 50-50, it's a 237. That's going to be tied with Phoenix, Cleveland. That's going to be tied with Minnesota, Memphis. We're talking about a really good game environment for a team that is just basically become offensive centric, like purely offensive in the post Isaiah Hartenstein and now Karl-Anthony Towns era. So it's just what it is. I think he would be an outrageously good play if he's good to go.
Yeah, and just I'm seeing some people bringing up Naz Reid in chat, and to me, he is, of all the pieces of chalk, I actually like Naz Reid the best, even over Karis LeVert. And this isn't even anything that I think is wrong with Karis LeVert. It's more so this. Naz Reid, you mentioned it, Eric. He already looks really good, but he is just easily, by a mile, he might already be the best play on the slate, but he's easily the best play on the slate if Rudy Gobert doesn't play. So I really like the idea of already having lineups preloaded with a ton of Naz Reid. If Rudy Gobert plays, cool. I'm already happy to have Naz Reid in the absence of Dante DiVincenzo. And then if Rudy Gobert is out, I would want to have Naz Reid in probably close to 100% of lineups.
Yeah, I would probably echo that sentiment for sure. Josh Hart game time decisions, which again means nothing. I know Josh likes to remind people of that all the time in a very nice manner, by the way. But I totally get that. I think for me, the main thing is that 25 minutes, 26 minutes, we've seen Naz Reid play so well, so efficiently the last few. And if Gobert is in, they're still going to give Gobert his normal stint. Whereas like Naz Reid, you would play him more than 30 minutes in this spot because they've just proven they don't want to go to Luka Garza. He absolutely goes to G League and just dismantles everybody whenever he's there. And then he comes back here and he just plays like a minute, 3 minutes from time to time if there's major foul issues or, the end of the first quarter, end of this third quarter type situations. But they really don't like going to Luka Garza if they don't have to. Even some of those games last season where you had one of the main guys sitting either between Cat or Gobert, we had so many times where you'd think, oh, Luka Garza 3K, he makes sense. Well, no, he doesn't really play the minutes because Naz Reid, he just gets first crack. And every single time you see him play like 30, 32 minutes, it's an absolute smash. So I totally echo that. I will say, though, 25, 26 minutes in the event that, he's in there, I think 5K for him relative to 25, 26 minutes for Karis LeVert. I know it's not a perfect one-for-one comparison, but it's $800 left. It's a different position. It gets me the positionality of like a Dennis Schroeder where I could potentially maneuver some pieces that I'm boosting in the Sims for the Golden State situation. But no doubt about it, Naz Reid, somebody is in half my lineups right now, so I'm just trying to play devil's advocate to some extent.
Yeah, and then as far as Josh Hart, he is officially questionable. Nothing's really changed here. Josh Hart, questionable, was at the start of the show. Karl-Anthony Towns, was questionable at the start of the show. We're just not going to find out whether those guys are in or out until 30-ish minutes before their game starts or something like that. So That game locks at 3 o'clock Eastern time. So there's a pretty good chance that we are not going to get an update on the Knicks guys until after the first 2 games of the slate lock. Who do you think starts if Josh Hart isn't able to play? Because we know if Cat is out, Jericho Sims starts. We've seen Tibbs do that time and time again this year. What happens if Josh Hart doesn't play, though?
I think there's a couple of options. I think one is that you basically slide OG down to the 3 and you probably go Precious Achua at the 4. I think there's definitely a world where you do that alongside Jericho Sims. I also think there's a world where they can go even smaller and they push Mikal Bridges to the 3 and they start Miles McBride. So it's either going to be one of those two. I think both of them are fantasy viable and definitely viable pieces if Josh Hart is out. I mean, you're giving obvious bumps to Brunson, Bridges, Anunoby. Karl-Anthony Towns, I haven't done the digging on it, but I got to assume his rebound rate is just nuts without Josh Hart on the floor this season. But you get probably a Precious Achua or a Miles McBride start. If you made me pick one or the other, I'd think probably 55% Precious, 45% Miles McBride for a guess.
Yeah, so we saw one other game that Josh Hart was out this year, and it was Achua who started in his place and played alongside Cat in that starting unit. But it's a game against the Timberwolves, who have one of the bigger front courts in the league. So I'm with you in terms of I think Precious is the most likely one just because it's what the Knicks did last time. I just can't really guarantee it because the matchup is so much different playing up against Atlanta, who generally tend to play smaller lineups where you'll see Capella and Okongwu split minutes at center. It's been a little bit more geared towards Okongwu, but often there are times where Capella and Okongwu don't even combine to play all 48 center minutes and they go with some smaller ball lineups. So will the Knicks want to ride with Cat and Precious in the front court against like Jalen Johnson when he's going to be starting a power forward for the Hawks? To be determined. I'm not really sure. I think Achua is the most likely one. And then McBride after that. As far as other players, I mean, you never know what other buttons that Tibbs might press, but it's hard for me to think anybody else is all that likely to start.
Yeah, those are the only two that I can really make a case for. It would really surprise me to see Campaign or Landry Shamet or who else could even they really it would pretty much be shocking to see anybody outside of those two. But which one of the two, as you brought up, that was kind of my main thing is looking at the box scores. They played Minnesota. It's hard to just say, oh, Precious is the de facto starter. I think he is ever so slightly more likely. But with Trae Young, Daniels, like just looking through how their lineups would be constructed, I think Miles McBride isn't exactly off the table. So yeah, 55-45.
And then if you wouldn't mind, Jordan, pull up the FanDuel ownership projections, which it's a lot of the same chalk players with some little differences, though. So over on FanDuel, you got Darius Garland, Jaden McDaniels, and Julius Randle all projected for north of 40% ownership. Jared Allen also really popular over on FanDuel. He gets the power forward eligibility in addition to the center eligibility, which makes it easier with that MP to get him into lineups. One big difference here, well, I should say two couple of big differences. Karis LeVert being $1,000 more expensive on FanDuel, still popular, but 28% owned instead of nearly 50% owned. And then Dennis Schroeder at $5,200. He's really popular on FanDuel. So you got a guy in Dennis Schroeder who's already showing up in lineups. And then if you do get the chance that Steph Curry ends up not playing, well, then Dennis Schroeder would really look good. So at that price point on FanDuel, Schroeder already looks good with potential to be even better. So that's where he lands as a chalk piece over on FanDuel. Some super chats that we have coming in. Shout out to Chris Albers, who wants to know how many minutes is Ty Jerome projected for. Also wants to know our favorite cheapies as of now. He's thinking of Jerome or Strus for a GPP play in a very few lineups. Is this stupid? All right. So first off, let me check our exact
play the animation
on Ty Jerome.
Play the animation, Jordan Klein. Play it.
Well, let me just answer the question. Then we'll play the
if you want me to answer the question, we got to play it. He brought up my guy today.
Ty Jerome, by the way, 19 and a half minutes is our projection for Ty Jerome. So Ty Jerome at 19 and a half minutes. Now, go ahead and play the animation so we can hit on the rest of this, Jordan.
30 seconds.
So good.
There it is, Eric. Nuke of the night. So you got your animation going. Is Ty Jerome your nuke of the night? Is there somewhere else you're going? Because Chris Albers left us a super chat.
So I like Ty Jerome. There is no doubt about it. But I think Ty Jerome is one of a handful of guys who can have things break his way. And Phoenix Cleveland is an hour and a half before Boston Golden State. We're going to see a lot of chalk roll in on Minnesota. We're going to see a lot of chalk roll in potentially on the Knicks based on when that news comes out. There are just different price tiers to what's going on here. And I don't think Dean Wade's all that interesting to me when you talk about how this works out from a salary perspective and then his fantasy point per minute rate. But you know who is? George Niang. George Niang played 29 minutes. They played a pretty tight rotation. You basically had an 8.5-man rotation with Mobley off the floor last time out. Sam Merrill played like 7 minutes. I'll call him a half person. But Ty Jerome, 22 minutes. It's still hard for me to envision a lot of scenarios where you don't get him subbed out for Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland in fourth quarters. There's just like no chance of him closing. But between Strus and George Niang, they both, I mean, it got a little bit wonky towards the end of that game against Minnesota. I mean, I unfortunately watched a lot of it, but I think George Niang is the guy who's just out there getting wide open looks. And think about how many creators are out there. Darius Garland, Karis LeVert, Donovan Mitchell. There are so many ways where George Niang is just kind of that floor stretcher. Max Strus can do the same thing as well, where I think they're both viable, no doubt about it. And it would appear to me that it's just going to be like a hot hand approach. But I do think when you're talking about like hot hand rate here, 3,500 for him, the guy is shooting only 38.5% from three. It's not terrible on the year, but George Niang playing 29 minutes out of absolutely nowhere, you are going to see like no ownership coming on him whatsoever. You're going to see almost no ownership coming in. Max Strus currently sitting, way more popular over on FanDuel at 4,200. On DraftKings pulling 29% ownership, one of the more over-owned pieces we have on the entire slate. I urge you, get a little bit different with me. Drop it down to a 20% owned George Niang nuke of the night.
Yeah, so I have another player that I like from the Cavs that I'm pretty well overweight to the field to, where you mentioned there are so many creators that are popular for Cleveland. Karis LeVert pulling a bunch of ownership. Darius Garland's pulling a bunch of ownership. Jared Allen, not a creator, but still pulling a bunch of ownership in the absence of Evan Mobley. The guy who's kind of falling through the cracks here is Donovan Mitchell. There are, how many players from Cleveland are more popular than him? LeVert's more popular. Allen's more popular. Garland's more popular. Ty Jerome's more popular. Strus is more popular. Niang is more popular. Donovan Mitchell is the 7th most popular player from the Cleveland Cavaliers today. In a scenario where Donovan Mitchell has a big game, well, he's only marginally more expensive than Darius Garland, but is half the ownership. I really like pivoting and getting to Donovan Mitchell and him being somebody that I get to a lot of from Cleveland. And it's clearly not out of the realm of possibility that he's the one who has the highest fantasy output on the team. And that could also make him a good leverage play off of some of those other Cleveland options. So I'm liking getting overweight to the field on Donovan Mitchell tonight, Eric. But yeah, there's a lot of viable players from Cleveland.
Freaking love that call. And again, the thing you can't understate enough is like if you end up overweight to a lot of the pieces, which is kind of what I plan to do here, it gives you a little bit of extra time where maybe things break your way with Steph Curry. Maybe they don't, but no matter what, I feel like I'm landing into guys who are sub 4K on this Cleveland team. And then I love having the salary flexibility that Donovan Mitchell adds to your lineup, adds shooting guard eligibility as well, which may or may not matter pending if Miles McBride gets a start for Josh Hart or not. Cleveland is just, I think, the most interesting team to be overweight to every single piece, just about, outside of Dean Wade, who I'm just going to play like next to none of, I'm sure. But George Niang, Max Strus, Ty Jerome. Don't hate the Ty Jerome piece by any means, although I will urge you to know that like Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, there's still a world where they just get all the unlimited run, unless it's a blowout. Ty Jerome, it's hard for me to envision him getting above the 22, 24-minute mark ever. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, so that is the team that's pulling the most, well, two teams that are pulling a ton of ownership today, Cleveland Cavaliers, Minnesota Timberwolves, just no other team remotely close in terms of what the field is doing for exposure to those two teams. The rest of Chris Albert's question, by the way, I have no issues at all with Ty Jerome. I think that he's absolutely worth a punt, even though we haven't projected for...
Karis LeVert now questionable. Are you fucking kidding me?
LeVert, all right. Well, this changes everything. LeVert's now questionable with a wrist injury. How does this keep happening with weird injuries in the middle of the shows?
Not only that, but just like, what? I mean, we're talking the most popular play, 50% on Karis LeVert. I mean, George Niang just looks insane. Ty Jerome is going to look insane now. Who do we think starts? I think Max Strus has to be the guy in line to start.
Well, LeVert could still play.
He could. He just got downgraded. What time does this game start? 2 hours from now, he's not playing. This game starts 2 hours from now, and they're downloading with a right wrist. I mean, this is just buffoonery, befuddling to me. Befuddling.
Here's the good thing about this. We have so much exposure to the Cleveland Cavaliers right now. Like, I don't think that I have to remove LeVert from my player pool. I don't think I have to do any kind of real finagling with ROI boost. We've got so much exposure to this team that should he get ruled out an hour and a half from now, it's not going to be hard to make adjustments and just move it around to other Cleveland players. So unless I'm wrong and you see it differently, is there something I'm missing? Do we have to make any kind of adjustments for this? It's just like, hey, we're going to have so much Cleveland exposure. We'll just update as more news comes.
I mean, I was already boosting these guys just to get more of them to have Golden State pivots in mind. But now it's just like, I mean, they're the best. It's the best team to target on the slate by far, especially if Karis LeVert's out. I mean, this is just going to be ridiculous. I don't really know what else needs to be said. I'm quite positive that Max Strus, just because he started all of last year, there just hasn't been a chance to maybe string him in there. I think Max Strus, the most likely guy. There are these weird times that, I guess we have to project Craig Porter Jr. for minutes now. Yeah, it's a weird one, man. It's a weird one. I doubt they go to like Sam Merrill. If Ty Jerome starts, he's the best play ever, but I'm pretty sure it's Max Strus if I had to guess.
Yeah, remember there was that fake out too where Strus was starting and all of a sudden the game started and he wasn't starting. Mm-hmm. So I think we're at a point too where the reason Max Strus wasn't starting earlier, it wasn't because of performance or anything. He's just working his way back from injury. He missed the start of the season. I think he's probably ramped up to the point where he could start should we end up getting... I mean, he might even end up starting anyway, even if LeVert is in. So I do agree with you. I think Strus is somebody who's live to end up starting now. We do have the Pistons starting lineup: Cunningham, Hardaway, Thompson, Harris, Stearns. So nothing bizarre or out of the ordinary right there. So that is something that's at least good to see, that we don't have any other kind of weird starting lineups. Rockets: Van Vliet, Jalen Green, Brooks, Thompson, and Şengün. Thompson, he was earlier in the day listed as questionable. That is Amen Thompson, and now he's going to be in. He's good to go. Also, somebody in the chat was asking about Isaac Okoro. He is out today. So it's not only Evan Mobley that's out, but Okoro's out as well. So just for your guys' information on what the rotations are looking like for Cleveland, while we are expecting it to be a little bit more condensed than what it normally is. And let's see, was there any other weird news? Nothing else yet. We've still got 26 minutes to go until the slate starts.
We always have to keep some things in context because Kenny Atkinson, this is his first year there. We didn't see him there last year. This is kind of a restructured rotation from times. He's just playing a tighter ship. It feels like even when they're missing a main piece, whether that was Darius Garland, whether that's Evan Mobley, he's playing like 8.5 man rotations, as I called it. Like, he's definitely doing things a little bit differently than we've seen in the past. And so, like, again, I don't want to project any minutes for like a Craig Porter Jr., but basically you can be safe in just saying play all of the Cleveland guys, and you're probably not making any kind of a mistake there.
And let's see what we have for, we got some super chats. We got some questions from Discord. Einstein wants to know, is Trae Young a lock today, Eric? That's a no for me.
No. Definite. There's not a single player, even with all this value that we're starting to get rolling in, or potential value, like nuclear value in a Naz Reid, nuclear value in whomever ends up being the fifth starter for Cleveland, whether that's Karis LeVert or somebody else. There's no locks on this slate. There's so much potential value. There's so many things that can change on a dime that are kind of hard to account for. So I would not say anything, especially the timing of that game in the middle of the slate here with Phoenix, Cleveland, Boston, Golden State. Nothing's a lock whatsoever.
Then we've got Boss Monkey wants us to talk about Yahoo. So unfortunately, the contests on IQ just aren't big enough and not enough people play them for us to really focus too much on Yahoo. So unfortunately, Boss Monkey, but can't really focus too much on talking Yahoo during the show here. Bees in Your Ass wants to know, is the first game even viable? Is the first game even viable? By the way, one thing I'll add about Trae Young, certainly not a lock, but he is, let's see, our ownership might be updated now. And yeah, we just got a fresh ownership update from a minute ago. Trae Young is 4% owned. He's a pretty reasonable contrarian play when you consider the amount of players who are out, the value that's opened up. I think I'll be overweight to the field on Trae Young, but I'm certainly not going to be locking him.
Yeah, there's Cade Cunningham in the first game that's viable. We're still talking about the first game that's viable, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. It was the question from Bees and US. He wanted to know. I just wanted to follow up and mention that about Trae Young, but Bees and US.
You just wanted to say that name again.
Even viable.
Yeah, the first game's viable with certain pieces. I think anytime you're talking about Cade Cunningham, he's the most expensive player on the slate. He's not the best projected player on the slate by any means, but you can't reverse engineer your lineups to go get him and his ceiling later on in the slate. So I'm definitely going to play some Cade Cunningham. I think it's going to be a really fun game to watch. I'm actually super excited to see Thompson versus Thompson Crime. I hope one of them dunks on the other one. It would be the greatest thing ever. They both have bunnies, so it's going to be fun. But yeah, there's not a ton else that I'm really looking at getting to in a massive amount. I have a little bit of Alperen Şengün, nothing crazy. I have a little bit of Isaiah Stewart, who I think at 3,200 is extremely, extremely interesting if things break his way or if this game blows out. There's ways that a 3,200 Isaiah Stewart is more interesting than most would think, but nothing's a priority in that first game.
Yeah, and then Larson wants to know, can we fade the first game? Or he said, do we fade the first game? I'm not going to fade it. It's not going to be a game I have a massive amount of exposure to just because players don't look as good from that game as they do on Minnesota or they do on Cleveland. So I'm just naturally not going to get to a ton of it, but I don't want to outright fade Cade or outright fade Alperen Şengün with Steven Adams out. So I'll be getting some exposure to it. I don't think I'm going to have anybody more than, say, like 20% of lineups, though, from that game.
Agreed. I would be shocked if I had more than like 10% of anybody. Like right now in my last run, I had like 8% Isaiah Stewart. I had 6% Cade Cunningham, and like nothing else. I'd probably have to force something else to get in there, but I'm excited to watch the game for sure.
Who's the player you have the most exposure to from the first game?
8% Isaiah Stewart.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think the player I'm going to have the most of is going to be Cade, but I'm not positive on that. I'll let you guys know after I rerun everything. We do have, with Steven Adams being out, that slightly alters some stuff, but like not anything crazy. But, no reason to not run an update for all the pieces of news that we have prior to lock. And we had some super chats that came in. So let's see what we have here. I bet some of these questions probably asked 10 minutes ago, and it's already probably different answers based on some of the news that's come out since then. But Clintwood83 wants to know, how should we approach roster management / news in cash? Just go with the early value or try to play late swap? Thanks. You all are the best. So it's kind of both, because the second game locking on the slate involves the Minnesota Timberwolves. And that is a need value spot with Dante DiVincenzo out. For cash, there's nobody I want to play from Detroit. Houston, once again, it's not even related to the time of the game that's starting. It's just based on what the projections are of those players. But no, you absolutely need to be playing some of the Minnesota players in cash.
Yeah, you're playing Naz Reid for sure. You're probably... I'm not going to say McDaniels is a must, especially because of the positionality of these cheap Cleveland guys. If you get LeVert out, you're probably going to want to play Niang and Strus in cash just to have both of those boxes covered. You're going to play the starter and you're going to play the first guy off the bench whose job is literally to knock down shots. They have like 3 of those dudes coming off the bench right now. Sam Merrill was another one, but Sam Merrill, just because of the size, because of some other issues with him, I've always been down on his minutes. He can go Inferno hot, and if he goes Inferno hot in 6 minutes, yeah, they'll give him some extra leash, but I'm pretty confident you'll see very secure minutes for those guys in a way where I don't think... I mean, McDaniels versus them is actually an interesting one for cash. I think that's something that I'd have to actually be playing it to really understand. But like 4,500 for McDaniels or getting to like 3,400 to 3,500 for 2 other guys, I'd prefer the $1,000 savings and just spending up, making sure I had Cat if he plays, making sure I had, another spend up, whether that be Tatum. If Steph is playing against Boston, traditionally I'm not a Steph guy by any means, but like, I'm just thinking about like what else you would have. More than likely, you're just going to end up playing the studs from Phoenix, Cleveland, if you had leftover salary in that from a cash game perspective. So, maybe Jason Tatum ends up being the guy that you're able to maneuver onto. He looks way better than a Steph Curry does, but Yeah, from a cash perspective, go to the Cleveland cheapies over McDaniels, I think.
Oh, something else to add, just because you brought his name up. I wouldn't be stunned if Sam Merrill starts today either. They go to him a decent amount when they're shorthanded to start. They kind of like there being, I mean, I don't know if this is the actual case, but it's something they've done this year. They do kind of seem to like just throwing in a low usage guy as that final starter who is either somebody like in Okoro, who's a good defensive player, or Sam Merrill, who's just a 3-point specialist. It's pretty common that we see a poor pointsman and fantasy producer as the final starter for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And that could be Sam Merrill because he's how many times he started this year? Like 3 or 4 or something?
Yeah, he's had a couple of starts. They had, wasn't Karis LeVert out though for some of those too?
I think he started over LeVert a couple of times.
Okay. I always go back to the Boston one where he was like mega 65% owned chalk, and I just basically faded him. That was fun. Again, he was coming off of a hand injury and had some other stuff that, or a lower body injury that was not ideal either in that scenario. So it's not a 1-for-1 situation. It's always one thing when you go back and look at the box scores, it can give you context for rotations. It doesn't always give you context on what the injury was or who else was available looking at it that immediate second. Let me find, I do want to look back at a couple of these starts just to know. I mean, obviously I'll have plenty of time after the show to be able to cover my bases for that, but want to cover that for the people here.
Yeah. So last start for Sam Merrill was on December 23rd against Utah. He played 24 minutes and scored 35.75 fantasy points. The start before that was the one against Boston, where he played 19 minutes and scored 11.75 fantasy points, then missed the subsequent game after that. So we've had 2 starts this year for Sam Merrill and averaging 21 and a half minutes in those starts.
Yep, not so bad. Again, yeah, one not so good, one very good. So there's that.
Just kind of, he's very dependent on making shots. If he makes his shots, he ends up having good fantasy games. If he doesn't, then he's a shitty fantasy game. As far as Clint Woods, the rest of his question, you still absolutely want to be late swapping in cash, but it's not something you'd forego the Minnesota value for.
Correct. Perfect way of saying it.
Official Chris Presto channel, as a contrarian option today, he says he likes campaign to smash in 15 to 17 minutes. That's really not how you should be doing projections, where you're just like, hey, for whatever reason, I think this guy is a 2 fantasy point per minute producer. It's not to say the campaign can have a decent game, but he is not somebody I'm interested in playing.
Yeah, it would take a lot of lineups for me. I'm playing 150. I have 0 campaign right now. It would have to get to like 500, 600 for me to start trickling campaign lineups in.
Yeah, we've got Payne project. And if a bunch of guys, here's where this changes. If Cat and Josh Hart are both out for the Knicks,
then he's viable.
Totally different scenario. But with all these guys projected in right now, we've got campaign projected for 12 minutes. Honestly, with a lot of value now. So as of right now, he looks thin. But Chris, it does change if more guys get ruled out for the Knicks, which is possible. Got multiple guys questionable on the injury report. Josh Chapman says twin brothers are playing in the first game. Yes, they are. And it's not something that really makes any kind of decision point for me. I like both the Thompson brothers, but I don't really love either of them for DFS today. And I think Eric's on the same page because he said that 8% of Isaiah Stewart is the most exposure he has to anybody in the first game on the slate.
That just came down for what it's worth.
Thompson brothers.
Yeah, the Thompson brothers, I said I'm super excited to watch it from a real life basketball perspective. They're also good fantasy producers. It's an opportunity cost thing, using up those lineup spots early, and they're not exactly free. Asar's gotten up there a little bit, not as expensive as his brother Amin, who is, playing giga minutes here, but Tari Eason's back, which is not ideal as far as like what that minutes upside could be. We were seeing him play like 40, 42 in some of these spots. I think those days are probably narrower now, very less frequent. Yes, Jabari Smith is still out, but I mean, they have Cam Whitmore. They have some other guys. Aaron Holiday's been mixing in a little bit here as well, going through some of those box scores. Jeff Green from time to time, in the starting unit at times, depending on who's in and out. But I look at those brothers as like, if they're a lineup filler and you're playing 150, that's just fine. But yeah, nothing that needs to be a priority whatsoever.
And the next super chat we have here, it is from Pierre. He is asking us favorite FanDuel plays at each position for the FanDuel after hours. All right, I did not build out lineups for the FanDuel after hours slate.
I did not.
So
either.
I'm going to do this right now after I finish my final Sims run for the main slate. and then I'll run Sims for the late slate, but it's not something that I have lineups built out for right now. I assume that's the same for you, Eric?
That is the same for me.
All right. Were there any other questions here in Discord? No, there are not. So I want to ask you about pay up options because we've gone over that there's a lot of value available on the slate. Who are you filling in the rest of your salary with? By the way, John Morant officially available to play. No surprise there. He went from questionable to probable earlier. We've gone over our favorite value options, Eric. Who'd you like paying up for today?
I like paying up for Cade Cunningham in the early game, it would appear, after rerunning some of my stuff. I just think he's going to be really low owned, 6-7%. And I'm happy to get like 15-20% of him. The other major one is Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, he's the one who's eating up a majority of the field's lineups at this spot, 36%. And that's still not enough. He still should be higher owned than that. He has also the potential of having Josh Hart off the floor, which would, again, just shoot his rebound rate to the moon if it ends up being Miles McBride out there instead of Precious Achiuwa. Precious would probably keep it somewhat in check, but even still, Josh Hart, I feel like I've said this for all 5 years that I've been on this show. Josh Hart is, to me, one of the more impressive. He's basically a two guard out there playing the three, and he is the best rebounder on the floor a majority of the time that he's out there. Obviously, less so with Karl Anthony Towns, Isaiah Hartenstein there, but when he was in Portland, when he's been around New Orleans, he's always impressed me with his ability to rebound. If you get him in today and Karl Anthony Towns out, I will have a lot of Josh Hart even at 8K. I feel like that's always a guy I'm a little bit higher on than Greg. Sometimes it works out really, really nicely, but other times it doesn't. But we're always looking for the nuclear ceiling. The guy has triple-double upside when he hits the floor lately. The assist rate has been way higher than I expected alongside Cat and Jalen Brunson this season. So Josh Hart is interesting for sure.
Yeah, let's see. What is our current projection on Josh Hart? Yeah, I mean, we don't have Josh Hart projected poorly. We've got him in for a little bit over 40 fantasy points at $7,900 on DraftKings. Then on FanDuel, it comes out to be 39.5 fantasy points at 8K on FanDuel. So yeah, he's in play. He's just not somebody who, there aren't that many slates, unless they're obviously different if Cat gets ruled out, but there aren't that many slates that I find myself really prioritizing Josh Hart. But obviously, really big floor for him just from a standpoint of he plays a shit ton of minutes. And Tom Thibodeau really trusts him. That's going back to the playoffs where we saw for like a week, he played 48 minutes in every single game or something like that. So big minutes for him. That definitely gives him a little bit of a floor. And all right, I have to run Sims for Pierre for the FanDuel after hours slate. So I'm kicking that off right now. Are there any particular players, Eric, that are really popular, finding yourself underweight to the field to?
Yeah, I was actually just doing that because I'm not even in like anticipation of you throwing out there. I'm obviously underweight to Karis LeVert now just because I think there's more risk that he's out. The only thing I did was I put an exposure cap in on the Sims. I think that was like a quicker way of doing it where I still have a little bit of him mixed in the event that like, hey, maybe these lineups don't mix and match as well as what I was hoping. I think it should be just fine because I have so much Cleveland, but just in case, thought I would do that. The other one is Jared Allen. Amongst these Cleveland guys, he is 37% owned. And as I was going through the Cleveland guys, which again, 6 of them I am overweight to right now, he is not going to be one of them purely because of positionality. We have Alperen Şengün in the early game. Karl Anthony Towns, I think, is under-owned even at 36%. We have the opportunity to get Gobert, Julius Randle, power forward center eligibility, Porzingis in the late window, Kevon Looney, somebody's bringing up in chat. I think he is definitely viable at 3,600. If Jared Allen's going to be pulling nearly 40% ownership, that's a little bit hefty for me at a position that's just kind of in the mid-range where I kind of like the idea of getting a little bit more Starsy and Scrubsy with it. So it's Jared Allen. He's the only Cav that I am underweight to currently.
By the way, Pierre, unfortunately, we don't have projections updated for the late after hours slate. It also doesn't lock for a little bit over 6 hours. So I don't have anything that I could run for that. Let's do an IOU. Also, I don't think that the information I give you will be that valuable for a slate that's 6 hours out. I owe you a super chat, Pierre. The next time you want to ask a question on a show that you want me to answer, just throw it into the YouTube chat and it'll be like a redemption for this one because there isn't really anything I could do. And then also there's only 9 minutes left until this slate starts. But yeah, I don't really have a lot of valuable information that I could give to you. So I'll make that super chat an IOU. I hope that's okay with you because I don't really have an alternative right now. And Rich just messaged me. Rich, I'll message you back after the show. But when I just short summary, I just went to run it for FanDuel in the contest generator and nothing showed up. So that was the issue I was running into. Eric, are there any other crazy contrarian options or pivot plays that you're finding for this slate?
Yeah, Gui Santos. All right. This is the disturbing one for all intents and purposes as I'm kind of working through it. Steve Kerr hates us. We all know that. Steve Kerr hates you. He hates me. He hates his team sometimes. But Kyle Anderson's out. Draymond Green's out. Jonathan Kuminga's out. I just listed off 3 guys that exclusively size at the 4, size at the 3. Like, I don't see a world unless they want to go small and it's Steph Curry, Schroeder, Lindy Waters. You could do stuff with Buddy Hield out there at the 3 too. We've seen that in Indy and here. Like, I think Gui Santos just starts and plays more minutes than we're projecting for right now. Like, if Steph ends up out, this is obviously a moot point, and hopefully that news comes out before the Cleveland stuff locks so we can get onto some of the Golden State stuff, which will definitely be under-owned. But, like, what do you expect from Gui Santos? Because we haven't projected for, like, 6% ownership. His optimal percentage is already looking pretty good. He's a flat 3K with power forward only, so he might not be the easiest guy to allocate salary and mix and match if you only have 1 or 2 lineups set for. I kind of like the idea of boosting him and just having a little bit more. Maybe that, like, it's Gui Santos. He sucks. He's not very good, but he's going to have to play minutes here in this spot. And normally that's the big uncertainty is it's like, oh, is it Moses Moody day? Is it Brandon Bajemski day? But with all of these pieces being out at that specific position, not a ton of forward length, I think Gui Santos is a lot more secure than you would think.
Let's see. Do I have Gui Santos in any lineups here? Steve Kerr has seemed to like him as of late. I've got 3% of him, so not a fade for me or anything like that.
But you said crazy contrarian. That's my one guy that it's like, all right, I've got like 20% of him.
So for me, it's all right. So single digit owned player that I have more than 20% of right now is Ja Morant at $8,400.
Yes. Love.
It's a matchup against Minnesota where we're already playing a good amount of the Minnesota side of the game. Ja Morant clearly has a massive upside. He's been all over the place this year, both in terms of his playing time, his production. I've never really been able to nail down the minutes of Ja Morant. I don't know how it's been for you, Eric, but like there's random games where Ja Morant's low owned. It's all of a sudden like, hey, look, he played 36 minutes. And when you get those full minutes allotments out of Ja Morant, there's a massive, massive ceiling. So at 8% ownership, I have more than 20% of Ja Morant. He's somebody who I'm liking for low ownership that he's secure in a different way than Gui Santos, meaning we know that he has a big role for the Memphis Grizzlies. But I just never know exactly where that sliding scale is going to be because sometimes he plays 27 minutes, even in competitive games. Sometimes he plays mid-30s minutes. Is Ja Morant somebody that you're landing on?
Yeah, Ja Morant, I definitely like. I also have 9% Desmond Bane, not quite the 10% marker there, but I mean, they're just playing so ridiculous. Like they're playing way up in pace. I mean, they just put up 140 without Ja on the floor against San Antonio. They're doing some ridiculous stuff. I've said this in multiple times this year. Santi Aldama continues to impress me as well, but this Memphis team is pretty darn complete. We knew they would be, and Ja Morant can be the catalyst for it. What is frustrating is like Desmond Bane was so bad to start the year, and Ja Morant was getting there in like limited minutes, like limited for his for what you would normally expect, like a 32, 34-minute guy in Ja Morant here. But Scottie Pippen has fallen by the wayside a little bit. He's been playing less and less and less in times where Ja Morant is in. Normally we would see like a 14-minute backup point guard. We're not really seeing that as much for Scottie Pippen. He's been like 10, 12 in some of these spots. I think there's definitely a massive ceiling there. Plus, it doesn't hurt to have dusty old man Mike Conley out there playing a lot of basketball. Ja Morant confirmed a little bit more athletic than Mike Conley.
This is true. I think a lot of people more athletic than Mike Conley at this point in his career. Let's see. Were there any other late questions that came in? Just want to make sure we answer them before lock, if that's the case. And no, we are all set up there. So few minutes left to go here, guys. If you haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Once again, if you want to sign up for any of the tools or packages we have at Stokastic.com, links are down below in the YouTube description box. And also, good time to check out Portfolio EV. We are right in the heat of the NBA season. We're midway through. We've got the link join offer that also applies to OddsShopper. If you guys wanted to sign up with any of our affiliates, you could also get 1 free month of Portfolio EV for each one of our affiliates that you guys sign up for. And also, we've seen a lot of people, they're kind of using Portfolio EV like the old school cash games for DFS, where people aren't playing cash games as much in DFS anymore. They've become very difficult to beat. But a lot of people that we have as subs on the site have started to go and use Portfolio EV as kind of like a less variance way to build up a bankroll. And it's not to say that you can't build really good GPP lineups, but GPPs are just not really expected to win every day. Whereas when it comes to Portfolio EV, you are expected to profit more days than not. So go check that out. It is a good way to buoy your guys' DFS play. I've got my final version of lineups built out here, Eric. So I don't know where you're at with yours, but is anything surprising you about your lineups as you're finalizing them?
Yeah, 17% Cade Cunningham. I'm going a little bit heavier than I otherwise might. Just it seems like it's a guy that I just don't want to be missing out on if he's going to be 5, 6, 7% owned and people want to really backload lineups, which I think is definitely live and viable. But I like the idea of getting to a little bit more of him. We did get Edie starting here in this spot, so just wanted to double check that here as well. But we've got Cade sitting around a 50 projection, 49 and change. I got a little bit more of him. His ownership's trickled up to around 7%. I think that's just fine. But in terms of early game exposure, him. And then Isaiah Stewart, I ended up with a double digit of as well. So I ended up with 11% of him when it was all said and done.
Yeah, Edie's tricky because he gets played off the court very frequently. Maybe this is a matchup where he wouldn't get played off the court, but he's been starting. This is nothing new. Edie has started, 7 games in a row for Memphis, but 7 minutes last game, 16 and a half minutes the game before. He's only played over 20 minutes in 1 out of those last 7 starts. And just what happens is he can't defend a lot of teams at the NBA level and he gets played off the court. But when he is on the floor, he's a really good fantasy producer. So I found him to be a difficult player to navigate just because if you do end up getting mid-20s minutes out of Zach Edey, he's going to crush a lot of slates at his current price point. It just is very rare that we could expect that to happen. But I don't know, maybe in a matchup against Rudy Gobert, should Gobert play? Is this a spot where maybe Edey does play 24 minutes?
That's kind of what I was getting at. He's 4,100. I don't think you understand how cheap he is if you get Gobert in there, and it can go very poorly. It can go very, very poorly. Against San Antonio, it went so poorly to start off that game. They pulled him off the floor. He played 7 minutes. To my understanding, he got hit in the nose. So I guess that was majorly what it was, but at the same time, didn't have to rush him back. I just wanted to get confirmation that he was going to be starting there in this spot. I'm surprised they put that starting lineup out because if it's Naz Reid out there, Naz is going to tool Zach Edey on offense, but Zach Edey is a lot bigger than Naz Reid. So it's going to be an interesting push and pull effect of that game. Something to keep in mind, though, because Zach Edey, when he walks into minutes against a Rudy Gobert type and plays 2022, he is now 4,100, which this guy was 5,100 here not too long ago.
Yeah, and he was also chalk at that price point not all that long ago. The team was a little bit more shorthanded at that point, but it wasn't really with guys who were impacting the minutes. It was like John Morant was out, and Edey was really popular on some of those slates. And that is going to bring us to lock. If you guys have not done yet, do us a big favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're not doing a post-lock show, but I'll leave playback going and I'll throw the games on screen. So if you guys want to hang out and playback, chat amongst yourselves and watch some of the games, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and join playback. Jordan will drop the link in there. Chris Kennedy also said, do I need email support for a free month of the tools for getting second in the 4-point play? Or do tweet Stokastic HOF? Do both. Tweet it to Stokastic HOF and also email support to give them a heads up about that with the screenshot and all that, and you'll be good to go. Guys, have a good day. Enjoy the holiday. Eric and I'll see you guys back here tomorrow. Have a good day.